on BBC T. It's nice to have you along. We're going to talk this morning about whether in the, in inverted commas, the internet era, whether that era is enabling a change in how we operate as a society, and asking if the rise of online sharing is a good thing for business and society. There was an article in last week's Big Issue saying that the culture of me is being replaced by a culture of we, and it's thanks to the internet. It's something called collaborative consumption. I've got the definition here. It's when a community gets together through organised sharing, swapping, bartering, trading, and renting to get the same pleasures of ownership with reduced personal cost and burden and lower environmental impact. Let's talk to social commentator Mal Fletcher about this. Good morning, Mal.
Good morning, Jamie.
This is something that we've been doing for hundreds of years, isn't it? This idea of sharing?
Yes, it is. I mean, there's something in our wiring that says, you know, our biggest problems are solved best through collaboration rather than competition alone. But what the digital revolution has done, and it all began with a Brit, didn't it, Tim Berners-Lee, and the creation of the World Wide Web, allows us to collaborate on a scale we never imagined before. And the gamers call it the architecture of participation. So when you use popular websites, even like Wikipedia today, you have a choice. You can either be a consumer or a collaborator. You can actually change the site as you use it. And now everyone from toy manufacturers to huge scientific concerns like NASA are picking up on the same principle.
Yeah, we've heard a lot about it over the last 10 years or so, this idea of interactivity, the fact that it's, if you want, as you say, you can write your own piece on Wikipedia, and with thousands, hundreds of thousands of people doing that, the sense is that that particular website will give overall a pretty good range of knowledge about most topics. However, can it really make a difference, this idea of online sharing? Because we're hearing of this collaborative consumption, and people who aren't online would say, well, why don't you just do that in day-to-day life? Why do it online when you could do it face-to-face?
Well, it's a good question, and there are some things to be wary of, definitely, with the digital revolution, but I think this whole collaboration culture, as I call it, is driven by a trust revolution. Underneath it is a currency of trust. It started with, you know, sites like eBay, person-to-person trading. The whole thing's based on your trust rating. Same idea now has spread to micro-enterprise lending. People can actually do good on the other side of the world by loaning small amounts of money to entrepreneurs, you know, who are setting up micro-enterprises in the third world. Same thing now has crept into venture capitalism in the developed world. And there are even ways of making money by sharing your car when you're not driving it. So I think people intuitively realise that, as one phone company has it, we're better together. Or as President Obama said, yes, we can. There are ways to work together on a wider scale via digitisation than were possible before.
I'm all for it. I mean, I contribute to things like TripAdvisor, for instance, which is a website where people can give reviews of restaurants or hotels and venues, and, you know, there's some criticism that there's no way of managing whether the people's views are genuinely motivated, or whether they're being maybe paid to put those views up. But in my case, I genuinely like the idea that my opinion might help somebody else.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, these things can be manipulated, as can anything else. I mean, a face-to-face relationship can be manipulated too if someone's a good enough actor. But here's the other thing about it, Jamie, that's important. Behind this revolution in digitisation is a new vocabulary. I think most of your listeners, like me, find it hard at times to keep up with the new words coming out that are born out of the digital revolution. And it's quite different in its way of thinking, not just its way of speaking. For example, it assumes that sharing information multiplies information. So people expect that large corporations, for example, will work together to solve problems like health crises, you know, sustainability and so on. Whereas before it was all about competition alone. And the latest adaptation of the internet, the cloud, is itself a product of collaboration between Google, Amazon, Microsoft and others. So there's this expectation that competitors will collaborate when it really matters for the common good, and that can't be a totally bad thing.
No, I find it hugely liberating. You know, I mean, the idea of, on something like Twitter, which, you know, I appreciate the vast majority of people don't use, but I find it hugely useful in finding good local services or recommendations for things from people I've never met and have no reason to trust other than I assume they're sort of like-minded people because they're using the same platform.
Yeah, that's right. And it all does come down to, I mean, if you can't be trusted, it does come out online. I mean, and it's very quick, the online community, to suss out those who can't be trusted. And then you're sort of, if not given a formal rating, then certainly treated a little bit more warily by others. I mean, there are areas we need to be wary of with digitisation for sure. In some cases, there's evidence that social networking can cause us to trade familiarity for intimacy, for example, or the psychologists talk about absent presence, where you've got a room filled with people who are not really mentally there because they're interacting on cyberspace. Yeah. But overall, like you, I think there's great a case to be made for the positives that have come out of digitisation.
I mean, take one of these examples you've given there, this idea of sharing our cars. So you presumably log on to some online-based group and you find somebody who needs to use a car on a day you don't need to use yours, and you both benefit for minimal cost. It's better for the environment, it saves money, it saves time, all that kind of stuff. But how do you convince somebody who's hugely sceptical of doing that online with someone they don't know that it could be a good thing?
Well, it really is experience, isn't it? Like anything else, until you actually try it and it works for you, you will be a little bit sceptical. I would simply answer that, this trust idea is also something that big groups have gotten hold of. And NASA, for example, is involving tens of thousands of what it calls click workers, who are just public volunteers doing basic scientific tasks on their computers at home and feeding the information to NASA. So if NASA can trust, I think there's room for us all to stretch a bit.
It's an absolutely fascinating topic, and I really appreciate you taking time to talk to us. Mal, thanks very much for coming on the show.